Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report, the show that, well, you can't get enough of it, can you? Stacy.
Pump it up. Pump the balance sheet up. Yeah. Well, the U.S. pumped $12.3 trillion of monetary and fiscal stimulus into its economy in the 13 months through March of 2021. This is data from Bank of America Global. You see the chart compared to other nations. The red lines, that's the fiscal stimulus, and the blue is the monetary stimulus coming from the central bank. This is coming from the government. But as a percentage of GDP, the U.S. basically printed 57% of GDP versus Japan, 74% last year. And who else is notable? Well, China, just 18%. So that's what follow up on that last episode. Remember when I suggested that the U.S. printing debt was a way to them strategically getting ready for the end of this current, 50-year run of the U.S. dollar as the settlement layer and reserve currency.
Yeah, it could be. It's the thing is that the U.S. is printing so much money that it's printing itself out of the game, right? So China and these other countries are now figuring out ways to bypass the U.S. in the 21st century, and the U.S. on the rhetoric side, they're pumping up the rhetoric against China, against Russia, against these other countries, as if those countries really are being in any way hostile. The only hostility going on is by the Federal Reserve Bank in America shooting aggressively the money gun at China, at Russia.
Everybody protects themselves from inflation. That's like the instinct, and kind of the central bank is hoping to control it as the money gun continues to print. And that's what we've been discussing over the past few months, is the rise of inflation. House prices are obviously going up rapidly in the United States, across the whole U.S. It's out of control. I mean, it looks nice if you own a home and you're like, hey, I'm getting free money every single day. But there's also the other sign of imperial decline. Again, this has happened 18 years in history of declines of empire and a rise of another empire or superpower like China. So it happens every time, and it's always kind of rhymes or similar, or things look the same. A Florida McDonald's is paying people $50 just to show up for a job interview, and it's still struggling to find applicants. So this guy is Blake Casper, and he's in Florida, and he needs help at his McDonald's drive-through. But nobody will bother showing up for a job interview because they're making far more on the enhanced unemployment benefits at this point. So, that happened. Most particularly, I remember in the Spanish Empire, is part of how they collapsed is they just stole gold from Latin America and modern day Latin America, and nobody had to work. So nobody did work, and everybody just lounged around at home. And then, of course, they got outcompeted by other nations who couldn't just print, take gold from other people.
Yeah, when you say that, I think of Norway, who's very responsible. They have a sovereign wealth fund. They're not idiots running the country like in the U.S. And the equivalent average McDonald's worker there gets $30, $40 an hour. They have middle-class lives. They get free healthcare, free education, or subsidized education. And they live like what in America would be considered the upper middle class, doing McDonald's, right? And here you have people that won't even go for an interview at McDonald's because they're living on the money gun from Washington, D.C., who they're just trying to appease the social justice warriors from rising up and storming Washington again. Remember, back in November, a couple of costumed freaks walked into the lobby of a, gift shop somewhere in Washington, D.C., and every congressman laid down on the floor, crawled up into a fetal position, and started crying for their mommy. That's not a country that I can believe in.
Well, I think, it was part of democracy. That's what happens, and people protest and things go a little bit crazy. But, staying neutral, looking at what's happening and looking at the data, what I could say is that according to this article, the labor shortage is also forcing Casper and other franchisees to raise wages. Casper said he is considering raising starting wages from $12, which is $3 above Florida's minimum wage, to $13 in an effort to attract more employees. Of course, this is one thing that's never happened over the past few years, is we constantly hear of labor shortages, and thus the answer, they say, is always to import more people from around the world to fill these jobs, immigrants to fill these jobs. But a shortage is usually met by the price signal. So if you can't find the people at the $12, maybe raise your price. And finally, it's dawning on companies to do this. You're seeing this across the trucking sector, for example. They've had to increase their salaries by 30% at some locations because there's such a shortage of drivers at the current price, especially when competing with the enhanced unemployment benefits. So, these are just facts of what happens during a disintegration of a fiat regime.
Right. Now, adjusted for the money printing and the velocity of money, where the bankers in the top 0.1% get their free money, if that were applied to wages for the past 40 years, minimum wage in America would be $80 an hour.
That's
right. By not paying workers $80 an hour, but by paying them 95% less than the market, and giving the difference in terms of trillions to hedge fund guys who also get a huge tax break, you've killed your country. That's the bottom line. That's it.
Well, I'll tell you something that's been very, very ingenious. And I said it in the last episode, and I thought, if this whole global Ponzi scheme is about to come to an end, if the runway for debt is about to come to the end, if we're already at 0% interest rates and negative interest rates in many places, well, while you can, why don't you rack up as much debt as possible, but build actually things that will help you launch into a real economy one day. Build infrastructure, right? So here we have the infrastructure plan that the administration is seeking to implement. Of course, they're arguing in Congress about how much it's going to cost. But at this point, you should just rack it up because this system is over. Build whatever you can. I mean, they want to build a lot into so-called broadband penetration, which is really poor in America. But this just goes to those telecom giants, right? Elon Musk is already launching satellites all over the place without permission, not needing some infrastructure plan. You've already got that. But there's other, the thing where I could see that they're going to run into big problems with the current structure of our cultural war going on here in America, the Cultural Revolution, as we talked about with Charles Hugh Smith, is that Biden takes charge on climate, but what about mining? They want to introduce electric vehicles all across America, and this is part of the infrastructure plan as well. They want to build, charging stations all across America. But the problem with mining, with electric vehicles, is that they need cobalt, they need lithium, they need rare earths, and they need nickel. And the U.S. doesn't really mine much of it, if any at all, partly because of how much the regulatory burden of getting the license, because it causes huge amounts of pollution. And as you know, with the Congo produces most of the cobalt, and it's an ecological disaster zone there. This is going to be the next confrontation on whether or not, in particular with lithium, that the U.S. can produce it. We do have 10% of the reserves for the world supply of lithium, but it's mostly in the West, and the West has entered since 2000 a mega drought. So these are the conflicts emerging on that side in terms of whether or not we could advance on this the techno-utopia of electric vehicles.
Well, the problem with this infrastructure bill and spend is the same problem with quantitative easing. The oligarchs keep it.
Yeah.
You can't distribute it. You could say, we want to build infrastructure in America. Here's $5 trillion. It's just going to, Jamie Dimon over at JP Morgan and the other oligarchs will just hold on to it, and they won't distribute it. They won't hire the people to actually do this stuff. So the oligarchy in America is the biggest impediment for America from competing with China and these other countries around the world right now. And no matter how much money they print, it's going to be gobbled up by the oligarchs, who will just, buy bigger chateaus in the Hamptons and bigger boats, and then they'll complain about not getting enough of this free money.
True. As you talked about with Charles Hugh Smith, there's that theory about the oversupply of elites, and we do have way too many princes and princesses, and they were raised with expectations of having certain cushy government jobs, being in think tanks and at New York Times, Washington Post, but all those places are laying off people. There's a shrinking pile of that. And you can see that with the viciousness. I mean, just Google private schools, New York, Los Angeles. There's just chaos going on there because it's so vicious, to secure these spots. And if you look at what's the viciousness, if you look at, remember the scandal of all those parents who paid bribes to these, the school teacher, the head teachers. So what you're seeing is, on the one hand, they're saying on the news, on the cable news, that, hey, we're going to end white privilege. That's what they say. Look what they do. The viciousness to secure their spot for their child in these elite schools, which are like, revolving door to elite positions in the media and in politics. So they're showing you by their actions that they're going to do something very different from what they're saying on the television news.
Right. Get rid of white privilege, get rid of elitism, and everyone is equal here in America. But the actual schools that are the gateways to the Ivy League, which is the gateway to the free money from the Fed when you're at that free job down on Wall Street, is very, very vicious. These you want to see some violence? Go see these Karens.
Posh Karens.
Posh Karens down there at the America's private schools, elbowing their way to the chancellor's office, trying to get little Petey into their privileged little school. But at nighttime they're drinking their Chablis and saying, oh, we can't be so white. We need to be less white. And then by the day, they're like, get out of my way! Right? It's like, they're so disgusting.
Yeah, but...
I mean, where's the Maximilian Robespierre? That's what America needs. Let's get it on.
And finally, there are these very elite public schools that are free to go to. They're public schools in the various states. And they're basically getting rid of the meritocracy to enter that. So that was open to whatever kid who was the smartest in that whole region. But it turned out to be, basically they're getting rid of the meritocracy because it wasn't the right selection of people that they wanted in the school. So again, just look at all the facts, look at all the actions that these actual people do. And then you'll see possibly.
So much so. Well, as I say, America, don't blame China. You did it to yourself. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Craig Hemke of TF Metals Report. Craig, welcome back.
Max, always good to see you, my friend.
Now, on Friday, gold prices got slammed, as always, when COMEX opened. Anything new there, or just business as usual?
No, that's just how it works. You and I know that the banks have a monopolistic control on the pricing mechanism. They like to paint the charts in their favor whenever they can. And silver in particular was on the verge of breaking out and closing above, on a Friday, above its 50-day moving average. And any time, but particularly in the last year, if it's been above its 50-day moving average, it usually moves about $3 or $4 in the weeks that follow. So it was pretty important they got it back down, and they did. Imagine that.
Now, the Fed manages perception, and that's what they claim to do. They manage the perception on inflation, on the state of the economy and the value of the U.S. dollar. Price signals can't be allowed to tell the market anything but what the Fed wants them to say. So why would they ever allow a price signal on either bonds or gold or silver to contradict what they want their propaganda to say, Craig?
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot, Max, in that the Fed has fought gold. I mean, the folks at GATA have documented this for decades, right? Going all the way back to the London gold pool and before then, right? They've got to prop up confidence in the dollar by making alternatives to the dollar, that would reflect lack of confidence. Look unstable and risky. I mean, that was in the WikiLeaks documents from December 74 that they had this planned all along. But, Powell has indicated several times now in the last 6-8 months that he's terrified of deflationary expectations leading to deflation and more deflationary expectations, kind of citing Japan over the last 30 years. So I'm starting to wonder, and I'm not ready to go there yet, but I'm starting to wonder if maybe they wouldn't mind a little higher gold price because it would be reflective of maybe some higher inflationary expectations. And that's what they've got to have. I mean, we're so deeply, upside down in terms of debt to GDP. We're back to where we were after World War II. And the only way they got out of that hole was by inflating away the debt, by capping interest rates. That's where we are again. That's what they're going to do. That makes a long-term picture for gold and silver pretty positive, regardless of what the Fed might want.
Craig, you have a plan. So, starting on May 1st, you are planning a silver squeeze. Now, long-term viewers of this show will remember crash JP Morgan buy silver, which had some success for a few months. They will also remember that the Wall Street Bets crowd tried to squeeze silver a few months ago, didn't really go anywhere. Craig, tell us about this. Why do you think you're going to succeed at this?
Well, a number of things, Max. First of all, buddy, we've known each other for 10 years now, and that's when we first got acquainted. You were the tip of the spear back in 2011 with crash JP Morgan buy silver. And what was that reasoning behind that? The system is so heavily leveraged, right? Where we have no idea how many beneficial owners there are for each ounce. I mean, they trade, 100 times mine supply over the course of a month or even a day sometimes. So if you can force a deleverage of the system, you get a chance to maybe get back to something that is actually a fair price based on physical supply and demand. Well, the only way you're going to force a deleverage of the system is to take metal out of their hands. I mean, get it out of the bank's hands. And that's what crashing JP Morgan buy silver was all about. And damn, we almost got there until the most clear, overt, obvious manipulation of our lifetime occurred on May Day 2011. And we can talk about that history for anybody that doesn't remember it. But I thought that was it's always a rather auspicious anniversary. I remember it every year because it was just a remarkable thing to observe, the corruption of it all. So when I thought about what Wall Street Silver kind of threw together over a weekend back in the last weekend of January, and what I've learned since, I mean, in my position, at TF Metals Report, I'm blessed to know a lot of people. And some of those folks are some of the heads of the major bullion dealers around the world. And what they've told me about not only the situation that retail demand put them in February, but how tenuous that wholesale situation remains today, I thought, well, why the hell wouldn't we do this again? I mean, if we were that close in February to inflicting a change, to waking up people, then why wouldn't we do it again? The LBMA themselves admitted this past week with their spring first quarter report that the system, London was almost cleaned out. So I thought, hey, you know what, where we couldn't maybe get this done 10 years ago because, Twitter was in its infancy and there was no Reddit, we weren't all rowing together. I thought maybe we can really have an impact now. And I thought that anniversary was enough to really get people focused on the criminality of how these markets work in the first place.
A couple of, things to think about. First of all, in 2008, there was more outrage against banks like JP Morgan. Today, it's been totally normalized. And people, in fact, applaud the fraud as the basic operating system of the American economy. They're not outraged at all. They want more fraud. They want the free money. They want MMT. They want more quantitative easing. So anything that might disrupt those transfer payments from the government, they're going to not be too keen on stopping. Number two, we saw that the ability to meet every silver buy with a flood of fake silver sells and naked shorts, when JP Morgan got to the point where they were actually threatened by that, the government, the Fed, simply said, hey, you know what, we're going to relax the collar on how many of these naked short sales we're going to allow you to do it, and do it as much as you need to bang the price of silver down. There's no reason to think that wouldn't also happen again. I learned from the debate with Frank Giustra and Michael Saylor recently, gold versus Bitcoin. Frank openly admitted that the mining industry is really in the pockets of the regulators and the feds, and they'll do whatever they want them to do. So you're not going to get the miners that have a big part of this equation on board to support their own industry. That's the takeaway I got from Frank Giustra, is that the miners don't even support their own industry, much less the economy as a whole. So you believe, though, that you're going to make a stab at this. And I'm not trying to be a wet blanket or anything, but you just feel that the time is right.
Oh, Max, there's a lot to unpack there. Remind me to talk about the mining industry, because big companies there are not a lot of primary silver miners in the world. First Majestic, run by Keith Neumeyer, routinely withholds production and doesn't give it to the banks because they know the price has been ridiculously manipulated lower. Endeavor Silver just announced that they're doing this as well. They withheld half their production because they think the price is too low. And again, most of these mining companies, the bullion banks have them like this because they need the cash flow. And so they sell their production to the bank. The bank gives them money for cash flow. They sell the production to the bank takes production, and dumps it and keeps it for themselves and hedges against it and all this other jazz. They keep the price low. That what these miners don't understand is how that whole process, they're just screwing themselves. But that's a long story. Let me back up. What we're talking about here is not buying futures. Okay. When I talk about this squeeze, if anybody's in this just for profit, they think they're going to go buy futures contracts on, late next week and then, make $1 or something by Sunday night or Monday and dump it. Man, I don't want you on my team. That's not what this is about. No one's in this for profit. What people need to be considering, and again, I should make this very clear. I'm not a financial advisor. I used to be one 10 years ago, but I can't give financial advice. I got people emailing me and tweeting at me, hey, what should I buy and when should I buy it? I can't tell you that. I mean, that'd be financial advice. I can't do it. But if in your personal situation, it makes sense to diversify out of dollars and stop holding, your investments in dollars, then buy yourself some physical metal. If that makes sense, do it. And if we can all kind of make a practice of doing it kind of roughly at the same time and subtracting out something from the supply of silver investment demand, then we can really make an impact as how this system is structured. And so that's all I'm saying. I'm not looking to profit. All the silver I own, the silver you own, Max, is a diversification. It's an insurance policy against this system eventually blowing up. I'm not looking to buy silver next week and sell it in the middle of May. I don't even think I ever sold a single ounce I bought in the last 12 years.
Right. Well, to be clear, the silver I have is collateral that I use to buy more Bitcoin.
Sure.
So that's about the only value I can get out of it. But I tell you who is looking at these metals markets, quite interestingly, is China. They've increased the amount of gold that the banks can import to 150 tons. And, that's where we're going to get some action here because they're playing the big game. They have the ability to take on the JP Morgan and Wall Street, whereas I don't think anyone else does except China. So China is getting ready to divorce themselves from the U.S. dollar and U.S. dollar standard as a way to assert themselves here in the 21st century. Can't blame them. But that seems like a significant trend. Can you speak on that? What's going on in China a little bit?
Well, absolutely. The central banks have been net buyers of gold for the last several years, record levels not seen since the late 60s. And all they're doing is what I just got done talking about. They're taking their dollar reserves, right? Their savings from international trade, and they're diversifying them out of dollars into something more stable, more sound. If China's doing that, Russia, some of these other central bankers, why wouldn't you and I do that? Why wouldn't people listening to me do that? No one takes all their cash. It'd be foolish. And these governments aren't doing it either. They don't take it all and put it into one asset class. If you can diversify out of some of your dollars into physical metal and at the same time, maybe make an impact against these criminal banks, these oligarchs that have ruined everything. And again, Max, you were talking about gold. That's a whole separate deal. Yeah, but these gold and silver, the pricing scheme works the same way. We can make a much bigger impact in this tiny market of silver and then maybe shine the light. When people see the silver market for what it is, that'll shine the light upon gold. And people go, wait a second. If the gold's the same scheme as silver, then I'm going to get my hands on some physical gold too. So I truly believe that the time is now. It is possible for a worldwide group of people to make an impact against these elitist criminals that run these banks. That's the Department of Justice in the U.S. called JP Morgan's metals desk a criminal enterprise. It's not just me. So this is our chance, and I don't care when you buy it. It doesn't have to be May the 1st. But if you think it fits into your portfolio, get some physical metal and let's see if we can call them to account.
Changing gears a little bit here, let's talk about the bond market because that's also a market that provides major signals to the global economy. And we got yields kind of backing up a little bit, but then they come in there and they bang them down. Is anything new in the bond market? Just business as usual? Is that going to break out of its long-term manipulation by the central planners?
Well, Max, that's a big question here. Rates have been driven sharply higher in the first quarter. A lot of it seemed to be selling coming out of Japan, Japanese pension funds, Japanese government, and I think it got really, really overdone. And now you're seeing rates come back. At the same time, inflation is surging as some of the inflation numbers from last year get replaced with this year. Real rates going negative again. That's what the Fed wants. And real rates being negative is the biggest driver rationale for owning physical gold. So I think that's a big part of the puzzle coming up.
It's all interlocking these different pieces, and behind it all is U.S. dollar as world reserve currency, and it gives the U.S. seniorage or kind of a commission on all transactions everywhere. It goes to the New York Fed, and America's got a big winner in that that evergreen source of revenue. But well, this sounds exciting. I guess May 1st is the launch date. I'm gonna have to keep you over for a second segment to dig deeper into this because I'm starting to get excited by it. It's starting to get me my juices flowing. So we'll say goodbye for now.
Max, my pleasure.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank our guest, Craig Hemke of the TF Metals Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.